Red Bull's 2026 Formula One car has just been banned, and what the FIA discovered inside could change everything. This wasn't an illegal wing or a dodgy trick. It was a floor that reacted to engine vibrations, manipulating airflow with zero moving parts. The system was completely invisible, until one final compliance test exposed how it worked. And once the FIA saw the data, they outlawed it immediately. Subscribe right now, because if Red Bull just lost their secret weapon, the 2026 title fight might have just been flipped upside down. In a move that sent shockwaves through the paddock, the FIA has officially banned Red Bull's 2026 car design, specifically targeting the underfloor system that had been quietly developed in partnership with Ford's advanced powertrain division. What looked like a regulation-compliant chassis on paper turned out to be the center of one of the most controversial engineering discoveries in years. And it wasn't visible to the naked eye, it was hidden deep within the material structure of the car itself. The key element was a passive aerodynamic floor that responded to internal vibration patterns generated by the engine. Red Bull had designed the underfloor to interact with the natural harmonic frequencies produced by the combustion process, effectively tuning the aerodynamic load to change dynamically as the power unit cycled through different rev ranges. It didn't rely on actuators or electronics. It didn't bend or twist in any obvious way. But it behaved differently depending on how the engine was running, and that was the breakthrough. This wasn't a last-minute idea or a bolt-on advantage. The concept had been in development since early 2024, with Ford's acoustic engineers playing a direct role in identifying how vibration energy could be used to reshape pressure zones under the car. The result was a floor that delivered enhanced stability mid-corner, especially at high-speed tracks where downforce recovery is critical. And according to early simulations, it could provide as much as 0.3 of a second per lap without any increase in drag. Until now, the system had passed every test. Red Bull logged all materials, declared the structure to the FIA, and passed all static load and flexibility checks. But with the 2026 season introducing new rules around full system harmonic response, including how aero structures behave under internal energy inputs, the floor came under a different kind of scrutiny. And when FIA technicians ran correlation models comparing engine torque profiles with downforce fluctuations, the pattern became undeniable. The floor was reacting. Not in a mechanical sense, but as a consequence of how the car's materials were engineered to respond to vibration. That response created consistent aerodynamic performance shifts at specific torque ranges. It was invisible on track, undetectable through visual inspection. But it was real. And because it responded to powertrain behavior, not external airflow or driver input, the FIA declared it to be a reactive aerodynamic device, now outlawed under a newly clarified rule interpretation. From Red Bull's perspective, the decision came out of nowhere. The team believed they had found a new legal frontier, a way to extract performance from within the boundaries of passive design. There were no electronics, no sensors, and no flex. But the success of the system became its undoing. The FIA didn't object to how it was built. They objected to the result it delivered. And once it was clear that the technology could create an advantage others couldn't replicate in time, the ban came swiftly. Now, with less than 3 months before the first official 2026 shakedown tests, Red Bull is left with a car that was built around a system it can no longer use. That means redesigning the entire aerodynamic balance, adjusting suspension targets, and even modifying power unit calibration to match new floor behavior. It's a seismic disruption for the reigning champions, and one that might open the door for rivals to catch up just as the sport enters a brand new era. What most fans don't realize is that this ban didn't come after a protest or an on-track controversy. It came straight from the data Red Bull submitted themselves. As part of the FIA's new 2026 homologation process, teams were required to submit detailed harmonic behavior simulations. These are advanced models that show how structural parts respond not just to aerodynamic loads, but to internal frequencies generated by the power unit. Red Bull passed the static checks. But under vibrational analysis, something stood out, and it changed everything. The FIA's technical team identified a clear correlation. As the engine hit specific torque bands, the floor's pressure map shifted. That is, the way the air moved underneath the car subtly changed depending on how the engine was running. not due to flex, not due to electronics, but due to a phenomenon known as resonant material response, where specific composite structures deform microscopically in response to predictable vibration frequencies. The result? Passive downforce, precisely when the car needed it most. The key to Red Bull's system was its invisibility. There were no mechanical devices, no moving joints, and no hydraulic assists. The composite floor was built with micro-layered materials, likely involving tuned carbon layups and polymer dampers that subtly restructured how airflow behaved underneath the car. To the naked eye, the structure looked perfectly legal. But under load, the system entered a controlled vibration state that altered airflow just enough to make a measurable aerodynamic difference. What made this even more powerful and more controversial was how consistent it was. In FIA-supervised test environments, Red Bull's floor showed predictable behavior in over 90% of modeled conditions. This wasn't a random effect or a fragile gain. It was designed. It was repeatable. And it required no driver input. That last part is critical. Under current regulations, anything that changes aerodynamic performance based on internal system energy, even without driver activation, can be ruled illegal if it behaves like a reactive device. The internal designation of this innovation within Red Bull was rumored to be Project Delta, an evolution of earlier floor concepts explored during the late hybrid era. With Ford's help, Red Bull mapped the harmonic signature of their new power unit and aligned it with the floor's natural frequency profile. In doing so, they created a car that was not just fast, but smart, one that adapted its aerodynamic profile without any control systems. In essence, the floor became a passive intelligence layer, always listening to the engine, and always reacting. What the FIA feared was the escalation. If Red Bull's solution remained legal, other teams would be forced to replicate or counter it. That could lead to an unregulated race toward vibration-sensitive aero design, something that could push the sport into a dangerous and unclear frontier. With the 2026 rulebook already under stress due to massive hybrid complexity, the FIA acted preemptively. They didn't just ban a part. They issued a message: any concept that behaves like active aero, even passively, is no longer safe from reinterpretation. Red Bull may have complied with the letter of the law, but the spirit in the FIA's eyes had been broken. And that's where this decision lands hardest. Not in a courtroom. Not in the garage. But in the design offices of every top-tier F1 team, where engineers now know that brilliance can be punished if it moves faster than regulation. Red Bull didn't cheat. They outthought. And sometimes, in Formula One, that's exactly why you get banned. The engineering behind Red Bull's banned 2026 floor wasn't just advanced, it was visionary. In the face of one of the most complex regulation resets in Formula One history, Red Bull chose not to chase brute force or reinvent classic mechanical systems. Instead, they looked deeper into the interaction between energy and structure, between vibration and material, between sound and speed. What they uncovered wasn't just an advantage. It was an entirely new way of thinking about aerodynamics in the hybrid electric era. The breakthrough came when engineers realized the Ford power unit generated harmonic pulses, consistent vibration waves during specific torque curves. Normally, teams dampen those vibrations to protect reliability. But Red Bull asked the opposite: what if they used them? What if those vibrations could be tuned, amplified, and routed through the car's structure in a way that actively improved performance, all without ever crossing into active aero territory? That was the idea that sparked what became the most radical underfloor in the modern era. Red Bull's floor wasn't just carbon fiber. It was a multi-material acoustic interface, tuned to specific frequencies and layered with polymers capable of micro-response under load. These layers were engineered to align with the known vibrational signature of the engine, creating a natural feedback loop. At the right frequency, they would breathe, not in the literal sense, but in how they shifted pressure zones under the floor. That breathing effect stabilized the rear end and increased suction through the diffuser, especially in mid-speed corners. The beauty of the design lay in its silence. There were no actuators to inspect, no signals to intercept, no sensors to trace. It worked because the structure itself was intelligent, not digitally, but physically. It was a form of passive adaptation, a system that responded without command, because it was built to resonate with the engine's natural behavior. This made it not only legal under 2025 rules, but nearly impossible to detect under traditional inspection methods. And yet, it was doing exactly what active aero systems were banned for: dynamic performance modulation. This floor allowed Red Bull to tune the car's behavior corner by corner, without any driver input, and without adding complexity to the power unit. It gave them the one thing every engineer craves in a new regulatory cycle: predictability. As battery usage, fuel flow, and weight distribution changed through a stint, the floor remained stable, constantly smoothing out the balance. It made the car easier to drive, less sensitive to wind, more consistent over tires. In simulations, this translated into fewer setup compromises and lap time gain, not in spikes, but in cumulative advantage. But that edge, that invisible, elegant advantage, is what triggered the FIA's concern. Because it worked so cleanly. Because it created performance that didn't come from combustion maps or suspension settings or wing angle. It came from intelligence embedded in the car's skin. If left alone, it could lead to a new era of vibration-based engineering, a realm of performance that lies between legality and philosophy. The FIA acted not because they understood the full potential, but because they feared what might come next if they didn't. For Red Bull, the ban doesn't just mean ripping out a floor. It means unraveling a system that touched every part of the car's DNA. From cooling flow to brake energy recovery to rear ride height control, the 2026 chassis was built around a floor that no longer exists. Replacing it will be possible. Red Bull has the tools, but the clarity they had? That's gone. And in a year where every team is guessing, losing certainty may be the most expensive penalty of all.